She thought it was just a simple gesture of kindness, but she never imagined that it would reveal a secret that would change everything. What would you do if you found out that the homeless person you helped was someone you should never have ignored? We've all seen stories of kindness transforming lives, but this one is different. Maria was a simple waitress, working hard to make ends meet. One day, a homeless man came into the restaurant. He was barefoot, dirty, and no one even looked in his direction. But Maria saw something in him that no one else saw. What happened next? You have to watch to the end to find out, because what he revealed left her completely speechless. Before you start this exciting story, let me know in the comments which region you're watching from, and I'll leave a heart in your comment. Let's get started. Maria was the kind of person the world seemed to ignore. In the big city, where everyone always seemed to be racing against time, she felt like a small, invisible piece in a giant puzzle. Her shift as a waitress started at 4 p.m. and lasted until midnight, when she could finally catch the last bus home and see the sleepy face of her son Lucas, just 6 years old. Being a single mother wasn't Maria's plan, but life never goes exactly to plan. With Lucas' father out of the picture and a pile of bills on the kitchen table, Maria lived in survival mode. The routine was always the same. The restaurant tables were full of people in a hurry who hardly noticed who was serving them. Customers left sporadic tips, which, added to her low salary, barely covered the rent. Even so, Maria never allowed herself to show weakness. "I can last another day," she told herself, like a daily mantra. That night, however, things were particularly difficult. The restaurant was slow, and Maria knew what that meant: fewer tips and perhaps a disapproving look from the manager. To make matters worse, Lucas had a fever, and Maria would have to buy medicine that didn't fit into her budget. Even so, she held back her tears and kept a smile on her face, even when the physical and emotional exhaustion was eating her up inside. It was against this backdrop that he appeared. The sound of the doorbell announced his entrance, but what caught Maria's attention was the silence that followed. The man, clearly homeless, seemed out of place, almost as if he were breaking an unwritten rule. Torn clothes hung from his thin body, his feet were bare, and the dust accumulated on his skin told stories of nights spent out in the open. The whole restaurant seemed to hold its breath as all eyes turned to him, not with curiosity, but with judgment. The man avoided eye contact, keeping his head down as he walked slowly to an empty corner. It was as if he wanted to disappear, but at the same time desperately needed something. Maria noticed the stares of the customers, full of contempt, and the murmurs of her co-workers, who made no effort to disguise it. "Look at that, a beggar. He'll scare the customers away. Why do they let these people in?" Maria felt a pang in her chest. She knew it wasn't easy to be in his position, being treated as if she didn't even exist. She remembered how she had been ignored so many times in her life, not for being on the street, but for being who she was: a waitress, a single mother, an ordinary woman struggling to get by. With a deep sigh, she picked up her notepad and walked over to him. The whispering got louder, but she didn't hesitate. "Good evening, can I help you?" The man looked up hesitantly, and his eyes hit her like a punch. There was shame there, mixed with a deep pain that seemed impossible to hide. He murmured, almost inaudibly, "I just wanted a glass of water." That phrase echoed in Maria's mind. A glass of water. That's all he was asking for. Something so simple, so basic, but that seemed to be all he had the courage to ask for. Maria looked around at the judgmental faces, the sarcastic smiles of her colleagues, and felt a wave of indignation. "I'll get you something to eat," she replied, before he could protest. As he prepared a dish, his colleagues never missed a chance to criticize. "He's not even going to pay. You're wasting your time." Maria didn't care. In fact, as she filled her plate with what little she could offer: hot soup, fresh bread, and a piece of cake that was left over, something inside her seemed to change. She knew she couldn't solve all the world's problems, but at that moment, she could offer someone something he hadn't received for a long time: dignity. When she placed the plate in front of him, the man took a few seconds before touching the food. He looked incredulous. He looked at Maria with watery eyes and said, "Why are you doing this?" She answered sincerely, "Because everyone deserves to be treated with respect." The man ate slowly, each bite seeming like an effort to hold back tears. Maria went back to work, but her eyes kept returning to him. When he had finished, the man stood up, carefully adjusted his chair, and said, "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me." And then he left, as discreetly as he had arrived. Little did Maria know that this would be the start of something much bigger than she could have imagined. Over the next few days, Maria couldn't get that encounter out of her mind. The image of that man, so grateful for something so simple, accompanied her every silent minute. She wondered who he was, how he had gotten into such a situation, and, above all, why those few words of his, "You have no idea how much this means to me," seemed to carry so much weight. It wasn't the first time she had helped someone, but something about that moment had struck her differently. As she tried to get on with her routine at the restaurant, she realized that the day had left its mark on others too. Her colleagues, who used to make cruel jokes, now whispered behind her back. One of the cooks even commented in a mocking tone, "Our heroine helping the poor. Just don't forget that this isn't a charity shelter." The manager didn't let it pass either. With a wry smile, he suggested that Maria think twice before offering free banquets. Maria didn't reply, not because she agreed, but because she knew that trying to justify her actions to people who didn't understand would be pointless. Even so, these comments made her feel uneasy. Had she done something wrong? Had her kindness been in vain? But at night, when she got home and saw Lucas sleeping peacefully, something inside her took hold. It didn't matter what anyone thought. She had done what she thought was right. When she looked at her son, she wondered what she would do if he were in the same situation. The answer was obvious: everything in her power. And then she decided that if that experience had taught her anything, it was that the world needed more empathy, not less. Life took its course for a few days, but fate wasn't finished with this story. About a week later, Maria was cleaning a table by the window when the doorbell rang again. She reflexively looked up and felt her heart race. It was him, the same man. His clothes were still worn, but they were clean, and his hair and beard looked tidier. He looked different, but the look in his eyes was the same, a mixture of shame and determination. He approached hesitantly, as if he wasn't sure he would be welcome. Maria noticed that the same suspicious looks were present, but this time she didn't hesitate for a second. "Hi, nice to see you again. Would you like to sit down?" He shook his head and replied, "Actually, I wanted to talk to you. Just a minute." Curious, Maria called a colleague to cover her section and followed the man to the door. He held a battered envelope in his hands and seemed to struggle to find the right words. Finally, he said, "I needed to meet you again. I couldn't stop thinking about what you did for me. You didn't just give me food that day. You gave me something I'd lost a long time ago: hope." Maria was silent, surprised by the sincerity and intensity of his words. He continued, "I had no one. I've been living on the streets for months, not knowing where to go or what to do. But after what you did, I decided I had to try. I got a place to shower and sleep for a night, and the next day, I went to a shelter. They helped me find a temporary job. It's not much, but it's a start. And all this happened because you looked at me as a person, not as a problem." Maria felt her eyes water. She knew that a simple act of kindness could make a difference, but hearing it directly from someone who had been impacted so deeply was different. Still not fully believing what she was hearing, she asked, "But why me? What did I do that made such a difference?" The man took a deep breath and handed her the envelope. Inside was an old photo, worn but clearly meaningful. It was a woman holding a small child. He pointed to the photo and explained, "That's my mother. When she was still alive, she used to say that kindness should never be underestimated. You reminded me of her. That day, it wasn't just food you gave me. It was a reminder of who I was, of who I could still be." Maria looked at the photo and felt a lump in her throat. Behind that man's worn appearance was a story she could barely imagine. He looked at her with shining eyes and said, "I don't know how I'm going to repay you for this, but I promise I'll try." And with that, he left again, leaving Maria with the envelope in her hands and her heart filled with a mixture of emotions that she couldn't put into words. She knew that this was no ordinary story, and something inside her told her that this encounter was far from being the last. The days passed and Maria continued her routine, but something had changed inside her. She no longer saw her work as she used to. Each client was now a possibility for human connection, a reminder that everyone carries invisible stories, some so heavy that they cannot be borne alone. But as she tried to move on, that mysterious man was still lurking in the back of her mind. Who was he? What was his full story? Why did he seem to carry so much meaning in every word he said? It was then, on a gray morning, that Maria entered the restaurant to find an unusual scene. There was a commotion at the door, and the manager was arguing with someone. Curious, she approached and saw that it was him, the man she had helped. But this time, he wasn't alone. Next to him was a well-dressed woman with impeccably groomed hair and a serious but kind look on her face. The man seemed to insist on being let in, but the manager was adamant. "I told you, this isn't the place for that. If you want to talk to someone, wait outside." Maria intervened before the situation escalated. "He can come in. I'll sort it out." The annoyed manager shrugged and went back inside, but not before giving her a disapproving look. Maria led the man and woman to a discreet table. As soon as they sat down, he pulled out an envelope from inside his jacket, much neater and tidier than the previous one. He looked at Maria with the same intensity as before, but this time there was something else. Determination. "I said I'd be back, and I said I didn't know how to repay you for what you did for me. But now I think I do." Maria frowned, confused but curious. He opened the envelope and placed a document on the table. When Maria read the title, her heart raced. Letter of donation of property. She looked at him, not understanding, and he began to explain. "My name is Enrique Amaral. Before everything fell apart, I was a businessman. I had a comfortable life, a house, a family. But due to wrong decisions and some personal tragedies, I lost everything. I was consumed by debt and ended up on the streets. For months, I lived like a ghost, without direction, without hope, until you, with a simple gesture, reminded me of who I really was." Maria was stunned. He continued, "After the day you helped me, I sought support. I got a job and regained some of my dignity. But most importantly, I found people who believed in me. This woman here is my advocate, and I've decided that I want to repay you for what you've done. This property is small, but it's in my name. I want it to be yours, for you and your son's future." Maria couldn't hold back her tears. It was surreal. How could someone she barely knew offer her something so great? She tried to refuse, saying she didn't need anything, but Enrique was firm. "It's not about what you need. It's about what you deserve. I'm only here today because you reminded me that there was still good in the world. Please accept it." At that moment, the restaurant seemed to stop. Colleagues looked on from afar, curious, and even the manager, who was watching from the kitchen, seemed surprised. Maria didn't know what to say, but she realized that it wasn't just about accepting a gift. It was about continuing the cycle of kindness that had begun with a plate of food. She finally picked up the papers with trembling hands, looking at Enrique, who now had a calm smile on his face. In that instant, she realized that sometimes small gestures have the power to transform not just one life, but many. And that, in the end, the real wealth lies in the impact we leave on people's hearts. In the days that followed, Maria reflected deeply on everything that had happened. Enrique's gesture, as unexpected as it was transformative, was not just retribution. It was a symbol of something greater. She realized that her life hadn't changed just because of the property, but because of the meaning behind that moment. The kindness she had shown, without expecting anything in return, had set off a chain reaction that transformed both Henry's life and hers. Over time, Maria used Enrique's gift to open a small cafe, a place where people of all kinds were welcomed with warmth and dignity. At the entrance, a discreet picture displayed a phrase, "True wealth is in giving, not in receiving." This cafe became a refuge for many, and Maria made a point of sharing her story with those who came in looking for a place to rest or connect. Enrique also continued to be present, visiting the cafe and even helping Maria with some important decisions. The two created an unbreakable bond, a friendship that symbolized how humanity can come together even in the darkest of times. For Maria, the episode was not just a milestone in her life, but an eternal reminder that simple gestures have the power to transform the world. And so Maria went on to live with a greater purpose, inspiring others to believe that, even when all seems lost, an act of kindness can be the spark to start again. Want to see more touching stories like this? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. And for those of you who like a good story and watch to the end, leave your comment. I stayed until the end. Remember, the most valuable lessons come from the most difficult moments. See you in the next video.